So you saw in the examples that we are relying on exceptions for error handling. So now we're going to see how that works. Let's try first what happens when we intentionally send an error into our API. So what we're going to do now, here I'm going to start the version 0.2 that we've seen. So that is running now. Let's say I'm going to send localhost 5000, and instead of customers, I'm going to do customer slash. This is going to be an invalid URL. It's not a known URL for this API. So let's see what happens. And this is what happens. We get the expected 404 error, not found. But if you can see, the body and the content type are HTML. And this is, for an API, kind of inconvenient. You want API clients to be able to parse the information, and even if it's an error, to display or be able to display the error or put it on a log file. So sending HTML, which is the default that Flask sends when there's a 404 error or any other error, it's inconvenient. So now we are going to see what we can do about this. So let's stop the application and check out version 0.3. And in this one, we have implemented error handling. So let's take a look. We are going to use the error handler decorator from Flask, which allows us to define custom handlers for when there is an error. And here you can see this is the 404 one. This is the one that will be directly associated with the example that we just did. Here we are saying that when there's a 404 error, we want this function to generate the response. And what I'm doing here is I'm generating a JSON object that contains some information. So I include the status, the error, which is a short error message, and then a longer message that the client may decide to show or to log. Finally, I get the response from JSONify, which is a Flask response object. And for that one, I set the status code to 404 to match the error. And that is the error that I respond. I'm doing the same for 405, which is method not supported. This would happen, for example, if I try to delete a customer. And if you recall, I have not implemented delete for customers. We, in this API, decided not to allow customer deletions. So that will return method not supported. 500 will be the internal server error. That will be the one that happens when there's an exception that you are not expecting. So that will send a 500 error to the client. Now, the one that I have here at the top on line 23 is the interesting one. I mentioned several times that I'm using a custom exception for my own validation errors. These are the errors that occur when I try to do an import data method in a model, and I find that something's missing in the data that the client sent. And in that case, I ended it with raising an exception. The validation error will be handled with this function. This is a not very known feature of Flask. You not only can tell it to handle error codes for HTTP responses, but also for custom exceptions. So here I'm telling it that whenever someone raises a validation error exception, I want to generate another nice error message that the client can use. And note that here for message, the longer descriptive message, I'm using the arguments from the exception itself. And these are what I, for example, let's look for one. So here you can see that whenever I raise this exception, I send an error message that's explanatory, and that will be the message that the client will receive. So let's do another demonstration now with the new version. I'm going to start this API. And now, so I have it here. This is the invalid one. And look at this beauty. Now I get a very nice JSON error message that the client will be happy with.